Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership, business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I am joined by Don Zalek. Now, Don is one of the few people that I have met that have got a job right out of college and stayed there for 30 straight years. But Don eventually made the jump into business ownership, and that's what we are going to hear a little bit about today. So, Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, Don, tell us a little bit. You went to college, and then it sounds like you got a job that you stayed at forever. So when you were in college, what was your vision of what your future was going to look like, and how did you end up at a place that you stayed for so long?
Well, when I was in college, actually, my degree is in electrical engineering. And but during those 4 years, I found that I was not the maybe hardcore engineer that a lot of my fellow students were like at college, and I found myself being more on the business side of activities. And so when I graduated, I thought I was going to take maybe just a year or two off from the engineering world and go into the business world. Well, that year or two really turned out to be 30 years. I never went back really into the true engineering business that I thought I would. But I joined a plastics manufacturer right out of college, started as their service manager, and ultimately went to been their sales manager and then product line director for actually selling industrial plastics for the cooling tower industry.
Interesting. What kept you there for 30 years?
Well, it was a good company, a privately owned company. Liked the owners. They were a good group to work for. We enjoyed the relationship, and it was just no reason to leave. I guess I'm part of that old school today. Most people, 3-5 years, time to move on. I guess me being part of that old school mentality, didn't feel that was necessary. And I stuck around for many, many years and, really enjoyed, like I said, what I was doing and enjoyed the job and enjoyed, that industry.
So did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? At what point did you think, maybe I don't want to do this thing for the rest of my life, even though I've spent 30 years of my life doing it?
Well, a lot of people, we all have dreams. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to do this? Wouldn't it be nice to do that? Whatever it might be. I did, as a young person, have dreams of being a business owner of some type. Early on, I always pictured myself buying a franchise, maybe a fast food franchise or something of that nature. And over the years, I realized that franchising maybe isn't quite the best thing. There's not a lot of creativity, but very little creativity. You do it a fixed model way. You get saddled with a lot of the HR responsibilities, part of the job that I probably like the least. And I realized that franchising maybe wasn't the best move, but I always had that desire to be my own, run my own business, whatever that might be. And then, again, it was never clearly defined early on, but over the years, I started to come up with some different ideals.
So I'm curious where that dream came from. What was it that you thought about how your life was going to be different and how the idea of being a business owner was going to fit into that?
Well, towards the end of that 30 years at that corporate job, I was kind of moving in a different direction. The company was moving in a little different direction. We were kind of, I guess going in opposite ways. And I felt it was time after 30 years for me to maybe move on. And I really wanted to figure, okay, now what am I going to do? Am I going to go to another company and do the same thing that I did in the first company? Do I want to do something totally different? It was then that I really started to sit down, and this did not happen overnight. This is, a period of years, really, that, I thought, geez, I really want to do something I like doing. I mean, we very often, for many of us, we get put in a position, or we go into a position, and of course it puts food on the table, pays the bills, and we go through life, and it may not be the job you truly love, but it's there, and it's paying the bills. And at this point, because I felt I was going to be making a change, I said, geez, I really want to do something I want to do. The question is, what do I want to do? And, I sat down over, again, a period of a long time to say, what do I really like doing? Well, at my old job, I really liked the customer contact part of the business. I really liked being with my customers. Over the years, I kind of got away from the customer end of things. As you grow up in it, you end up move to the product line director. You spend more time running reports and running the business, running the division, and not as much customer contact. I really liked that. I also liked, frankly, after years of traveling, I liked staying home. I didn't need to do a lot of traveling. I liked staying home. I liked fixing up home. Man, I really liked, at our old house, working in the backyard, fixing up the backyard. These are all things, I really enjoyed. And I said, well, shoot, what can I do that I can incorporate these jobs that I like doing? And then an older coworker of mine, he had left years before I did. They had bought a B&B many, many years ago. And I reconnected with them and said, geez, what's that all about? What's it like? Is it something I would be interested in? And after doing, quite a bit of research, this is a job I like doing. I like staying home. I like being with customers. It just checked all the boxes for me. And that's how I started to go down the path of seeing, geez, maybe being a B&B owner is the thing I want to do.
I love that. So you took stock of not just the skills you had, but the things that you enjoyed doing. And it looks like you applied that equally, not just to what you were doing at work, but even what you enjoyed at home. And
exactly.
I'm curious, how long was this gestating in your mind before this idea for bed and breakfast came in? Like, walk us through the time process of you thinking through these things before it finally clicked.
That's a tough question. I mean, obviously, the process, the process of, deciding should I leave the company, or I think I'll leave the company. When should I leave the company? That I can't put a definitive date on that, but I would say that probably was at least 2 years that I was kind of at first just thinking about it and then saying, we are going to do this. When are we going to do this? And, even when it came to my ideal, I still had to convince my wife, so now that becomes as difficult as the first facet with, is she willing to take this leap with me? It isn't just a one person, it's the whole family. I have a daughter in school. She's in college now, but at the time she was, I started thinking about it. She might have been in elementary school, but certainly middle school. And, can I take the whole family with me on this journey? And, and then of course there's always the risk. What if we don't succeed? These were all scary, scary questions that you weigh out for a long period of time. But it certainly was probably 2 or 3 years that I, really, before I started to think about it and choose the B&B life, to the point of, yes, I think we want to make that journey. And then the actual process of finding a bed and breakfast, that in itself was probably a year or so process unto itself, saying, okay, we're going to make this leap, but where are we going to make this leap? What B&B are we going to buy? Where are we going to live? Obviously, B&Bs are all over the country. And do we want to live 10 minutes from here? Do we want to live an hour from our home? Or do we want to live 10 hours from where we're currently living? And these were all decisions that had to be made in part, really, as a family.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a bit here, Don, because I want to break down your thought process over that couple of years when you're feeling this disconnect in your job, you're getting a little bored with it, you're feeling a disconnect with the management that you worked with for so many years. Was there a point at which you just committed to, I'm going to start a business? Or were you just constantly thinking this in the back of your mind until you got to the point where an idea clicked and then all the real action started moving forward?
I can't say that it clicked like, oh, this is it. Today is the day we're going to make that leap. It was, again, not having any experience in the corporate world, not having, or I should say in the running my own business, or certainly not running a B&B, when I came up with the idea that, hey, I think I want to run a B&B, I can't say that it was a definite because I needed to learn more about it. I needed to learn more about it with my wife. So we went to some seminars, classes, if you will. They weren't formal classes, but, weekend seminars where, there are folks out there who have been B&B owners that will tell inspiring innkeepers what it's like. And, I didn't know the daily routine. What is it like to be a inn owner? Is this something, I think it's something I like. I certainly talked to that one coworker I mentioned. They told me a bit about it, but, that's just one perspective. At first I thought it would be a grand idea for me to start my own B&B. That was really the plan. I was going to build a building and start a B&B. And, so I started asking folks, the previous innkeepers that I had known, if it would be a good idea if I should start a B&B. They said, no, it wouldn't be, they wouldn't recommend it. And I said, well, geez, okay. So I took that as a grain of thought. And I went to, a couple that was giving some seminars, and, I asked them, I said, geez, I'm thinking about being a B&B owner and I'd like to start a new B&B. And they said, I don't think that would be the best idea. I think you should buy a B&B. Now, they also were, as well as doing seminars, they also were realtors. They also helped people buy and sell. And I thought, well, maybe their answer is a bit jaded because they want the business of selling another B&B to me. Sure. So I went to yet another person. I went to an innkeeper I had got to know that, actually had built her own B&B. I said, she's going to say yes. And she said, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't start a new B&B. I started buying an existing one. And so even this process of learning, wait a minute, I have this direction, but not a clearly defined path. It's a nebulous thing that you start to kind of focus in on. And that process took, again, several months or a year. And to make a long story short, it is much better that I did buy an existing B&B. What
are they telling you starting one from scratch and why they didn't?
Well, everybody gave slightly different reasons, but what I realized after the fact, now that I've been in the business for about 7 years now, I'm very glad I went the path that everybody suggested. When you start probably any business, you're going to spend many, many years just getting the business started. For a B&B owner, myself included, we're starting later in life. I was 50 plus, which is kind of the average age for a B&B owner. So, you might be at it for 10 years, 15 years, before you ultimately retiring. And, that's not a long time. It's not 30, 35 years that you're going to be doing this. But when starting a new B&B, and probably just about most businesses, it could take 5 or 10 years just getting the thing off the ground. And ultimately what you're doing is getting it going for the next person to take over. And, that is a very key factor. And I'm glad that, like I said, I didn't, because I would have spent the past 7 years, probably even going forward, just trying to get this new business started. And with an existing business, everything, but most things are up and running well. And, of course you have to make sure you pick the right business, but you start off running as opposed to just kind of, grinding the gears a little bit, trying to just get things started.
Yeah. So I'm curious, earlier you had mentioned that you had to get over this fear around what happens if I fail.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about how you did that. What was the process you went through? What were the questions you asked yourself? And how did you ultimately decide this was the right path?
That is probably the toughest thing. People say, "Oh, geez, what's your toughest part of starting a business or running a business?" It was really getting over that whole hurdle of, and I think this goes for a lot of people. You're relatively successful in whatever world you're doing. We were had our own home. Jobs were good. Again, paying the bills, everything was fine. Why would you want to upset the apple cart? Why would you want to just throw that and say, run headlong into running a business? That psychological thing, trying to get over that hurdle of, do I have enough faith in my abilities to be able to run a successful business? That is, the psychological part of it is, I would say, the most difficult part of the whole process. Everything else after that, yes, there's a lot of work. There's no doubt that there's a ton of work, more work in running your own business than staying in the corporate world. But it was that first hurdle of saying, yes, I can get over that. I have enough faith in my own abilities that I can be a successful business person. And that's, listen, I can't say exactly how that happened or when that happened, other than just through education, going through the process of, how can I teach myself, or how can I educate myself as much as possible as to what goes on at the business? And then at the end, it's partly just a leap of faith to some degree. You have to say, okay, I've done as much research as I have. I understand the process. I have confidence in myself. That's a biggie. And now we're going to take that leap of faith and make the jump into the business.
So did that confidence come just from all the time you spent going to these seminars and talking to people and starting to put the pieces together to envision how you would be able to become an innkeeper? Or was there some other key ingredients?
Well, that certainly helped. I mean, obviously the confidence, I think, comes with age. I mentioned early on, when I was 30 or 35, I dreamed of, again, running that franchise. Did I do it when I was 30 or 30? Why? I mean, of course, the classic example is, I don't have enough money, part of it. And that is part of it. Obviously, you get older, you get, you have more assets to deal with. And, but I think the majority of it is not having the confidence in one's own abilities. And it's not until in my case, I got older and said, I now am starting to have enough confidence that, yes, I can, I can do this on my own. Certainly the education helped me move a little bit closer to that. I would say that cliff, that leap of faith. But it certainly is the years of just being in the business world, I think, was the biggest help in getting me into that level of feeling confident in my own abilities. And then, like I said, the education as best as I could. Again, there is, for the bed and breakfast world, there are no colleges for it. You can get a degree if you wanted to in some sort of hospitality management. Most B&B owners don't have that. I don't have that. I have that degree in electrical engineering, and I have a master's in business administration. So, I mean, I did have from that point, I did have some background education with the master's. And then the rest of it was just, a lot of it is self-taught. But it's a combination. It's not something that says this is there was no definitive point for it. Now I'm ready to go. It's just years of, going through, learning yourself type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Don, because it sounds like you had this dream on the shelf for many, many years, and it took you a while. Your biggest challenge, as you have shared with us, was getting over that hurdle, that confidence to take the leap and commit. Yes. What perspective would you share with people struggling with that same issue? They have this dream, maybe they've been nurturing it for many, many years. What would you tell them?
Well, I would say, first of all, sit down like I did and decide and figure what it is that you truly like, what you truly want to do. Because one thing that I learned over the years, looking at others, the people who are the most successful in life, and I'm not talking about, it can be business owners, it can be people in the sciences, but the people who seem to have been the most influential in whatever industry they were in. I'm calling you from central Pennsylvania, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Of course, Milton Hershey is the founder of Hershey's chocolate. Very, very important person in the chocolate world. Obviously, this town was founded by him. He grew up with him, and his history. He loved candies, loved it. He spent his entire life. Was he successful? For 50% of his life, he was a failure. But he was but he eventually became successful with chocolates because he loved doing it. And that's the biggest thing for me, I think, was finding what I truly loved to do. Because it seemed that those people became the most successful people in life, doing the things they were doing they truly loved to do, not just, I'm going to work to put food on the table or pay the bills. Yeah, it pays the bills, but, you've gotta pick that activity that is that true love, that core, thing that, really motivates you, because everything doesn't go right. There are tough days, and there are always going to be setbacks of various degrees. But if you're picking something that you truly like to do and really want to do it, that drive will keep you going through all the tough times.
Yeah. And it sounds like you found that for you when you had evaluated your skill sets and the things you liked, and then you were able to connect that with an industry or a business model with the bed and breakfast. And that sent you down the path of then figuring out, how do I do this? Do I do it via a startup? Do I do it via an acquisition? So now that you've had this epiphany that you want to move forward and become a bed and breakfast owner, what did you do? What did that process look like for you over the year of figuring out, where are we going to buy this business? How am I going to convince my wife? And those may be two very long answers.
They are. Again, for her, she had to digest it too for a long period of time. And during that process, again, we went to some seminars, and then we worked with a broker. Actually, again, I go back to the one person, the one couple that was giving the seminars. Again, they were B&B brokers. And I said, okay, let's look at some bed and breakfasts. Now, the question is where, for us, because both my wife and I have family here in Pennsylvania. We wanted to stay in Pennsylvania. We wanted to stay near our family. We had aging parents. We didn't want to move 2,000 miles away and to have a bed and breakfast where it would be difficult for us to get back on a regular basis to family. So we wanted to stay somewhere close to us. So that narrowed down the focus. So then we just started looking at B&Bs. And that was a fun part. You get to look at all these properties, and some bigger, some smaller. What can you afford? That's a big thing. Where do we want to be? What size? And during that process, my wife started saying, okay, this is something I think we could do. She could do this. And like it. And, we were staying relatively close to home. I say close to our previous house. We did sell that house. We moved about an hour and a half away, but we're still in the immediate area. And, but we found the property that worked well for us. Again, going back to the whole family thing, obviously my daughter was still in school. Probably as an important, probably even most important, I even mentioned, was a school district for my daughter. Finding a property that was in a school district that was a good district that she could go to high school in, because that was as important as finding the right B&B. And we were able to find a good school district, a good property, a property that had, physically, in quarters that were large enough for a family. Most B&Bs have living quarters that are really designed about maybe a couple at best, two people, living in one room or two rooms off to the side. We needed more room because, again, it was the three of us. And we found that property. And because all the pieces were falling together, that, of course, further encouraged her to say, yeah, that's the, a good property. That's a good location for us. We're close to family. We're in a good school district. The owner's quarters is a good size. These are all things that, said, okay, now the move is starting to make more and more sense. And again, that nebulous thing that when we first started 2 years back, 3 years back, whatever it was, that was just very vague because it finally started to come into focus, finally to the point where it's like, that is the property. That's the location we want to be at. That's the price point we want to be at. How do we make it work?
Yeah, so I'm taking from your story, Don, that you never actually got full buy-in from your wife. You just said, hey, let's look and we'll see what's out there. And we don't have to make any decisions today. And you slowly put her in the pot and just turned on the heat, started boiling her before she knew it. She was signed up. So you started first with identifying the type of business you wanted to be in. It sounds like the next most important thing you identified was geography to narrow it down. And then you talked about figuring out what you could afford. So how did you figure that out?
Well, okay. So now, I wanted to purchase in the B&B world, they refer to as a couple different styles of bed and breakfasts. There's a lifestyle bed and breakfast, and then there's a financially viable bed and breakfast. Lifestyle bed and breakfasts are usually smaller properties. They might have 3 or 4 guest rooms. They're not large enough that they can support the mortgage and the payment of staff and everything. Generally, it's a property that, either you already own the property or somebody else is paying the mortgage, though maybe the spouse is still working. Smaller property. I wanted a financially viable one so that, again, the business would be large enough to support the mortgage, support the payroll, support, all the operations of the business. The question becomes now, how do I make that work? Obviously, we had some money. Basically, the majority of it was, we had our house paid off. Okay, that was a good start. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough. I needed more than what that would support. And then it became, the broker I was working with had mentioned, again, financing is a big part of purchasing a bed and breakfast. And he mentioned that the rollover for business startup is an option that a new owner can take. It was one that he did not take, but he told us about it as a group in one of the classes. And I said, well, maybe that is something I wanted to do. I had more money in my in my 401k than I did what the value of the house was. So it was a significant amount that I could put towards this new business. And ultimately I said, that's the route that if we want to go down this path, I need to go, you want to say all in, if you will, by using not just our house money, but also my 401k money.
So I'm assuming you also got some type of a bank loan
Oh, yeah.
So what is the typical equity percentage or that they'll give you on a bed and breakfast?
In our case, well, a lot of times it's like buying a house, some people will buy a house and, I can go in with the minimal amount. Let's just go in with, that's what that minimum amount is. And I've never been that way. I've always wanted to have a little bit more wiggle room. Because I never wanted to go in, and particularly, again, starting a business, more important, in reading, one of the main reasons small businesses fail is not having enough cash flow that first year or two when they're getting started. And I didn't want that to happen to me. So I wanted to make sure I had more than enough extra cash available, not knowing, again, what the day-to-day operations would be like. And, so for us, I was looking at about 50%, maybe 40% ultimately is what I put in, and the bank put in 60%. Would the bank have put in 80 and I'd done 20? They might have. I wasn't comfortable with that. So when I said 60-40, they were. And actually, ultimately, the bank went, and initially it was a three-way loan. It was an SBA for a portion of it, the bank for a portion of it, and then me putting in 40%.
So, man, you did all the things. You're bringing in home equity from another house. You're bringing in retirement funds. You're bringing in an SBA loan, and you're bringing in some traditional bank financing.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a lot of wheels moving, and of course, bringing in the 401k was yet another level of going all in. I mean, it's not just, geez, we're going to try something new in life. We're going to put everything, literally everything I've worked for the previous 30 years. Now, my wife's 401k was not touched, but everything I personally had worked for, that house, that 401k, I'm going to put it all into this business. And if the decision wasn't tough enough already to take that leap, but to take the leap now with, 100% of everything you've worked for, that's a tough decision. You got to have, you got to have faith in your abilities.
So, Don, you are an electrical engineer by trade. You don't strike me as the kind of guy who goes to Atlantic City with $25,000 ready to drop it on a roulette table. So walk us through how you decided to make this kind of an investment that was requiring you to pull on a lot of different levers of capital that you had access to.
Yeah, well, that was the education part of it. Obviously, I educating myself to the best of my abilities. Again, talking to anybody and everybody I could, learn from, whether it be from the banking side. Once I decided, okay, now we're starting to move forward with this. How do we put together the financing? Talking to the people who were representing the SBA, talking to the bank, finding a bank. I mean, B&Bs in themselves are, they're kind of in the category of restaurants. Restaurants have a high failure rate. Banks aren't real thrilled about loaning a ton of money a lot of times to restaurant owners for their fear of failure. B&Bs, same thing. It's a riskier loan. It's okay, but talking to all these people and, again, having the background, the understanding, the business world, the one thing that I can really appreciate, I really thank my previous, when I worked in the corporate world, was really truly getting an understanding of the business world. Yes, I was in sales and service, and that was my primary job. But because it was a small company, medium-sized company, really, and I was able to see, by talking to others in that company, the understanding the accounts receivable, the accounts payable side. It was not my job. I didn't do it on a daily basis, but I could at least understand the process. And also, so just drawing on all that history, all that knowledge and saying, can I put this together? Can I put all these bits of funding together to make this work? And then make sure it makes it work. And again, that goes back to, I got to make sure I have enough ready capital because, this can't fail,
Yeah.
Particularly when you're dealing with, this is my 401k. This is my entire future here as a retired person. And, it's just, again, going back and having the faith and the understanding or knowing your own abilities. And, that's why I would never have done this when I was 30 or 35, because I would not have been ready to be able to put all that together, as a younger person.
Yeah. Well, walk us through the logic, Don. How did you decide that 40% was the right amount to put down? And how much were you targeting to save on the side as just extra cash that you'd have available as plan B with the business?
Well, I wanted to have, of course, I wanted to make sure, I talked to owners and, how do you have in the bank? What do you want to take? Of course, obviously the size of a B&B dictates a lot of how much reserve capital you might have. But, a lot of folks were saying, I heard people say, I have, $20,000 in the bank. I have $25,000 in the bank, and I'm thinking to myself, what happens if we have a bad year? God forbid, what would happen to be a worldwide pandemic and business would shut down in the hospitality business for 12 months? That'll never happen. But I wanted to have, a good $100,000 in reserve that, I could basically pay the bills for pretty much a year, without having any income. Did I need all that money? No, I didn't. But man, I sure as hell was glad I had it in 2020. That's for sure.
Would you, if you had started the business right before the pandemic, would you have needed it? What I'm trying to understand is, did you just start enough before the pandemic?
No, I wouldn't have needed it, actually. Now, again, the pandemic threw a whole new monkey wrench into our business, like it did everybody's. I mean, geez, it was obviously it was a wake up for everybody. But as it turned out, I did not need all that reserves, even during the pandemic. I became a different type of business owner. And again, like a lot of people, you had to learn on the fly. But there were people that started popping up that was doing research as to basically where to get grants. I wasn't looking for loans because there was a lot of the SBA was talking about loans and there was a lot of grants out there. And because I had that reserve cash, I said, I don't need loans at this point. I mean, if I was out of money, well then, yeah, you got to do what you got to do. But, if I could get grants that, would, help the business, I'll certainly take them. And there were grants out there. The SBA had grants. I mentioned my loan was through them. They actually did a few months of loan forgiveness. They just paid the loan for a couple of months, their portion of it, not all right, but their portion. And as it turns out, we ultimately did not need to we tipped into it a little bit, but that core reserve did not get largely affected even during the pandemic. And I was, of course, very thankful that we managed to navigate that without really any undue financial stress, because you don't know. That was again, it's fear of the unknown. It was fear of the unknown. When I first started out, and geez, our life is perfect now. We don't need to, everything is, we got food on the table. We got the bills paid. Do I want to make that leap of faith? The fear of the unknown, during the pandemic, again, it was that fear of the unknown, but it all worked out. You rely on your abilities, your knowledge, and, what you spent years learning, and you try to reapply it to whatever the problem is. And that's what it is. You become a problem solver. And engineering, customer service, sales. Again, a lot of that was problem solving, different types of problems, lots of different problems, but you just become a problem solver. And the pandemic became a big one, but just another problem to solve.
What I find interesting in your story, Don, is you have the pandemic come up in an industry that was very highly impacted, right? They're shutting you down and saying you can't have people who are coming here. But because you had these reserves that you had planned to have from the beginning of the business, you weren't feeling the same amount of pressure. So instead of going out and borrowing money and putting yourself in debt that you were going to have to pay back over time, you went and pursued some grants. So tell us about where you found these grants, how that thought occurred to you. Did it just sort of magically fall in your lap and then you're like, this is great, I'm going to find more?
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously, the world was abuzz about, what was going to happen. When the pandemic first started, I thought to myself, okay, well, if this lasts a month or two, we'll be fine. As long as it doesn't go, it started in March. So as long as it doesn't go past the summer, we'll be fine. Well, obviously it lasted pretty much a full year. Very early on, obviously, most of the news, a lot of people were talking about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan that the government was putting out. And of course, obviously, a lot of these programs were the big ones. Were televised and they were on news but there was also within the industry, we work with a company that actually they host our website, but they also do marketing for us. So their main business is marketing for small inns and B&Bs. And obviously during the pandemic, no one was worried about doing marketing. At that point, it was stay in business. That was the goal. And so they had to reinvent themselves. So they went out and started doing research as to, and not just grants, but just all aspects of, how to run a business during a pandemic, like as if there's a book on this. But they start looking around for, what innkeepers need to do, because in our case, we were allowed to stay open. Not that we had a lot of business those first few months. We were allowed to stay open as a essential business in Pennsylvania, and we did stay open. Again, we didn't have many guests, but how do we operate that way? And of course, they had various webinars on how to do that. And then there were financial webinars. Okay, hey, we found another grant. We first of all, it was the PPP. Everybody applied for that. And then, oh, wait a minute. The federal government is now going to give money to the states. Okay, well, let's go find that group in the state of Pennsylvania that is giving out state grants, and we applied to them. And then then it's learned the state is also giving money at a local level. So now the counties are also giving out money. So let's go find the county representative that is giving. So yeah, you become a bit of a detective, but again, through these various webinars that, again, everybody was having to reinvent themselves. And, the bank came to us and said, hey, we're willing to defer mortgage payments for 6 months if you would like to do that. I did that. Actually, that was probably a mistake. I probably didn't need to do that. I shouldn't have done that. It cost me a little bit more money. They allowed us to defer the mortgage for several months, but of course the interest kept ringing up, which again, I had the money. I didn't need to do that. That was a mistake. But, again, you're going through this, mistakes are made, and hindsight's 2020. But, again, everybody was having to reinvent themselves, and through that, and just being connected to these other industries, our payroll company, who was, again, they do payroll for small businesses. They were having webinars on, what can be done to, again, the PPP, apply, making sure people knew how to apply for that. And so it was a group effort. It wasn't just me. We just all kind of learned it together over a period of ultimately many, many months. It all didn't happen, in the first week by no means. It's just a matter of, somebody else found something else out. Let's get the word out.
Well, Don, you guys clearly navigated well COVID and come out the other side. You've now been at this, 7 years?
7 years now. Yep.
7 years. So 7 years. What did you expect life was going to look like when you first bought this business? And in what ways has it met your expectations? And in what ways has it surprised you?
Well, I really couldn't tell you what I expected 7 years down the road. Obviously, we've been successful at it. We've navigated COVID. We've been, a reasonably profitable B&B. It's one thing you don't get into the B&B world to become a billionaire. There's not that kind of money in it. But I've grown more as an individual than probably maybe financially I've grown. I mean, yes, we're obviously, we'll be, whenever we get out of this business years from now, we'll have certainly been successful financially. But when I look back at it, I would say that my greatest success will be me as an individual growing. I was already had the faith in my abilities when I started it, or I never would have gotten to this point. But I have seen, again, going through even more issues, learning more thing about being a business owner, that I yet now have even more faith in my abilities, that I am a better individual, stronger individual. And, so I think a good part of that wealth is not material wealth, dollars and cents, but actual wealth of me being a better individual, a smarter individual, is, again, unexpected. I really didn't ever think about that when I first started this process, but it has been a huge benefit, and will be a huge benefit, I think, ultimately, whenever, we go through this and ultimately end the B&B, but it has been, I guess, a big benefit to me individually as a person.
Yeah, could you talk about why that is, or what's been different or better about your life as a result? And the reason I ask is because you're talking about these personal benefits of it, which if you were going to go on to have another career after the bed and breakfast, that I think would make a lot of sense to people. But it sounds like when you're done with the bed and breakfast, it's probably retirement time for you and Ellen. So talk about why that still feels like the greatest return that you've received from going down this path.
Well, it may or may not be retirement time. I don't know. I mean, that was my thought initially when I was getting into, okay, this is how I'm going to end my working career, is at the B&B. Maybe I won't end my career at the B&B. Maybe I will sell the B&B. And I said, geez, there's something else yet I can do, as a successful business person, but not just that, but a successful business owner. There may still be yet another step that was never intended to be there. Like you said, I really thought that, I would do this until I retired, and that may not be the case. Because, again, I've grown as an individual. I didn't think that would be the case. I really thought, the person I was at the end would be the same person I was at the beginning. It's not. I think I'm yet more confident in my abilities. I have learned a lot more because you're taken out of that comfort zone. We all like, I think as a general rule, we like to be in that comfort zone. We like to know, what's around us. It's working. No one likes to take that step outside the comfort zone. And when you're in a small business, when you're running your own business, you're constantly being put to the test, if you will. Do I know how to be a good HR person? I have any education in HR, to be honest with you. It's, but you got to learn it. You got to rely on others around you. You got to rely on, hiring good people. And I'm not saying just staff here locally, but, whoever that is, our accountant, learn from the accountant, our payroll people, learn from them, constantly, being able to pull from those people as well. And, but you're always being tested to a degree, and you're always having to get outside of that comfort zone a little bit. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because I think as individuals, that's how you grow. That's how you need to be tested a little bit. And for me, for many years, again, I'm talking when I'm in my 20s and 30s, got to stay in that comfort box. I got to stay in that box. I don't want to step outside that box. Now I'm very comfortable to do that and try that. As I mentioned earlier, I may not always make the right decisions. That decision I made with the bank during COVID, not the best decision. Cost us a little bit of money. But we get over it. It's fine.
I'm curious, Don, for you to say that, maybe it's not retirement. That leads me to believe you've got some ideas that have been germinating in there. So what's been tossing around in your head as you think about what might be next for you?
Well, I don't know yet. Again, we're in that very nebulous spot again. Okay, now we're going back, to 9-10 years ago. Again, it's very nebulous. What do I want to do now that takes me to that next step? Do I want to keep running the B&B for another 10 more years? My wife would probably say it's probably better we don't do it quite that long. Do I want to do this hospitality, stay in the hospitality business? Do I want to run a different business? I honestly, I cannot tell you. It's still too nebulous at this point to say that this is what I want to do next. But I think that there could be another next now. And it's not just, when I'm done with the B&B, we're going to retire and I'm going to sit in the living room. As long as I'm physically able to do something, I want to keep doing something. To sit around and that's not me at this point. Hopefully the health will stay good and I'll be able to do that. But again, you never know. But like right now, it's just too nebulous to say exactly what I want to do going forward.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've got the bug. You've got a little bit of the taste of autonomy and a little bit of taste of the fulfillment that comes from doing your own thing and having the rewards and sometimes consequences of your choices and your actions. I'm curious if you could go back and trade, knowing what you know today, back for your life that you had before. Would you trade? If so, why not?
Would I go back and not make this decision, go down this path?
Yeah, or would you go back if you could trade back today and have, your corporate job that wasn't pushing you outside of your comfort zone, but the bills were paid and you're on track towards retirement? If not, why?
Definitely not. No, I would not. I'm glad I made this path. I'm glad I went down this path. Definitely. Would I have done it earlier? I don't know if I would have done it earlier. I would have liked to have said, yeah, geez, I could have gained that knowledge quicker and maybe more efficiently. But I certainly am very happy making the decision that we did make. And, again, getting that understanding and getting that knowledge of running a business, has been so beneficial for me. And, would I have made the decision a few years earlier? Possibly so. Again, hindsight's 20/20, but, I would certainly do this path again. And I had mentioned a little bit earlier, alluded to anyway, is there still something else that I need to do? Possibly. What it is? Not sure yet what that is.
That's great, Don. Well, Don, one of the things I love about your story is the thoughtfulness that you brought to bringing clarity to what was going to light you up. So I think a lot of the reason it sounds like you've been able to achieve success and find this personal growth is the work that you put into understanding yourself and then translate it into what's the right type of business for me to be happy in as, an owner operator. So congratulations on that front. I think it's always exciting when people talk about the benefits other than just the financial, because that's such a huge part of becoming a business owner, really taking ownership of your life in a different way.
Exactly.
Decisions and the outcomes. So, Don, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. Really appreciate you and hearing a little bit about your story today. Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.